Hi, my name is Lisa Berger from Optimum Re, and this module of the Optimum Academy will review some common tax forms and where you can easily find financial information that you need during the underwriting process. Now, the tax form 1040 and the schedules is what we're going to touch on today. The main form for federal taxes in the United States is the 1040. Now, there are separate schedules that calculate taxable income and feed into that 1040, the 1040 being the summary of all the schedules and calculations in the background. And being familiar with the forms and the schedules are going to help you increase your confidence during your financial underwriting. So let's take a look at the 1040 and some common schedules that you'll see. Now, the 1040 is a summary from all the schedules and the calculations. Now, you can see in the highlighted in blue, the 1A, the information there is the wages, the amount earned, and that comes from your W-2 statement that you get from your employer. Now, further on down, there's other lines here that will show different sources of information. And then when you get down to the part in green, the capital gains or losses, that is fed in there through a Schedule D, and that's usually something that's a short-term, long-term, non-recurring. But is important to have for calculating your taxes. Now, the additional income in line 8 there in the yellow, that comes from Schedule 1, and there's quite a bit of the other schedules that feed into that Schedule 1, and then that feeds into here, and then you normally will add the lines in there in the red and the 9 to get to your total income. Now, there are some adjustments that can be made, and you'll see the adjusted gross income there in line 11 there in the purple. Now, we want to be careful to not include the capital gains usually in the total income. So normally what you're going to see is line 9 there. You're going to take out the capital gains. Capital gains just aren't recurring in the normal sense. They could be in some situations, but generally speaking, that's not a recurring thing. So you're not going to keep that in the income. Now, here's some schedules that will feed into the 1040 and where you can find the most detailed information. The Schedule 1 shows additional income, and there's other things that feed into that. Schedule C shows your business profit or loss. Schedule D shows capital gains or losses. Schedule E encompasses a lot of information, whether it's rental, real estate, royalties, partnerships, S corporations, estates, or trusts. Schedule F is specific to the farming industry, and the K1, or Form 1065, shows partner share of business income. So let's take a look at these a little bit further. Now, here's an excerpt from a Schedule 1. This captures additional income. This is in addition to the wages that you get from your W-2. And the top of the form captures business income from Schedule C, there in green. And the rental, real estate, royalties, partnerships, S corps, trusts, captured from Schedule E, that feeds in there on line 5. And this also feeds in the farming information there on line 6, which comes from Schedule F. So if we take a look at a Schedule C, this is business profits, losses, so it's basically your business information. Part 1 shows your income, where line 1 in the blue shows your gross receipts or your gross sales. So this is, the sales. Sometimes people will say that their income is the sales. Well, that's not really true. You also have a cost of goods sold. So those, whatever you're selling, there's a cost to obtaining those or creating those, depending on what that good is. And that's in line 4. And then in line 7, you take all your income, take away the cost of creating that, and you're going to get your gross income there on line 7 in the green. And that's the information that you're looking at. And you're going to carry that down through with other expenses, and you're going to get your net profit or loss on line 31 there in the yellow. And when you're calculating business information, income, and looking at what financial justification you can come up with, normally the net profit is what you're looking at there on line 31. So Schedule D shows capital gains or losses, and it's broken up into a couple different parts. I'm just putting excerpts of these forms so it's easy to see. Part 1 shows short-term capital gains and losses, and normally that's on assets held 1 year or less. Now, Part 2 shows long-term, and they consider long-term to be anything that's held more than 1 year. And again, these are usually not included in income because they're not normally recurring. And we'll show a one-time event. We just have to pay taxes on those, of course. But when we're looking at income, that's not normally what we're going to include in that. Now, Schedule E shows rents, rental real estate, royalties. And Part 1 captures property income and expenses. You can see they're highlighted in the green and the red. Now, Part 2 captures partnership and S-Corp information. They're in the kind of bluish color, I guess. And Part 3 is for estate and trust income, and that's in purple. Again, these forms are just excerpts to try to show you that there's a lot of information captured on the forms, and not all sections will be filled out, just the ones that are pertinent to that particular person or their businesses. But this kind of highlights what you're looking for because it can look a little jumbled. Schedule F is used separately for farming, and this is really key to seeing the actual income. Farmers are unique. They're able to reduce their taxable income very generously by using depreciation. They're usually asset rich and cash poor. So we want to be able to give them the full benefit to protecting what those assets are, and this is a good way to see that. This schedule shows a much higher income than what is carried over to the 1040 summary. So this shows sale of purchased livestock and other resale items there in line 1A, highlighted in yellow. And then in green is the sales of livestock, produce, grains, and other products that they raise or create. Line 7 in pink shows the custom hire income that they have, and then you add that together, and then you've got your gross income there on line 9. Normally, that income is what you're going to use when you're looking at justification for farmers. We normally do 30 times that amount, but I wanted to show you that piece of it. The Schedule K1, or the Form 1065, is where you find details to partnerships. Part 1 is information about the partnership itself, and Part 2 and 3 are the partner share. Part 2 is profit and loss. They're in the blue. In the green, you see the partner share of the liabilities, and they're in the red is the partner's capital account analysis. So that information is about just the partner's piece of it. And Part 3 of the Schedule K1, this is a continuation, it's on the same form, but again, just excerpts so that you can see it a little more clearly, includes the partner share of the business income and other business accounts. Sometimes you'll see people that have more than one business, and you'll see reconciliation worksheets for each of those separate businesses, and those worksheets will feed into the K1, which will then feed into the Schedule 1, and then the Schedule 1 will feed into the 1040 summary for everything else. So it sounds more complicated than it really truly is. It's just kind of like math class. You got to show your work in the schedules. Now here's just a basic example of the tax form, what you see for a 1040, and where the information is coming from. So there in line 1A, that's W-2s. So you get your W-2 statement from your employer, and that's what you enter on the line as you following the boxes there. The other information comes from schedules. Now here on line 8, you can see there's additional income information that's obtained from Schedule 1, line 10. This one shows capital gains as well on line 7. It's good information to have in case there is a particular situation where it's recurring, but as I said before, normally it's not recurring and we wouldn't include it in income. So for a simple example, you would include the line in blue from your wages, the line in purple for your additional income, and put those together, and that's normally what we would consider for income for that year for that person, for the tax forms that you're looking at and you're trying to justify coverage for. Now, the Schedule 1 that feeds into that 1040, you can see there on line 5 for the rental real estate royalties partnerships, that 243,776, and in purple you see that it refers to Schedule E. So Schedule E feeds into that Schedule 1. And then the excerpt from Schedule E in pink shows that the Schedule E information comes from Schedule K1. So there's a lot of background information, but it shows you exactly where the information is coming from, and you can use that to go to those specific forms if you need to get a little bit deeper into what's behind the income. So this is a basic example. So let's take a look at another one with business income. So again, this is a 1040. The W-2 or wage information is on line 1A in green, and the other income information from Schedule 1 is there in blue. So basically, we're going to add those two together, and we're going to get what the total income generally is. So let's look into what it feeds that at Schedule 1, because we know there's a lot of schedules behind that to feed into that amount that might tell maybe a more difference, a more in-depth story. So the Schedule 1 on this one shows he has business income, and that comes from a Schedule C there in green. And then the rental real estate royalties partnerships, S Corps, there on line 5 in purple shows that the source is from the Schedule E. Now adding those two pieces together, you get the total amount, and that's going to feed there in blue as it shows it's going to feed into your 1040 line 8. So that's that piece of it. And we also want to look to see what's on the Schedule C and what's on the Schedule E. Maybe there's more information there that we would need. Maybe there's not. So the Schedule C, it shows the income from the business, the expenses for the business, and they're on the bottom in the green, that line 31 for the net profit or loss. That's the $38,999 on this, and it shows there that it feeds into Schedule 1, line 3. So that information goes there. You know exactly where it came from and where this part goes. So you can see how the equation goes both ways. And we know there was also a Schedule E that fed into this. And this calculates the income from rentals and royalties and adds it to the partnership or S Corp information. Now this gives you a total line on the bottom there at line 41, and that's scheduled over, as you can see, to the Schedule 1, line 5 there in the purple on the left-hand side. So again, this 1040 is a summary, and the schedules show the background information. So if you wanted to get into more of its passive income, not passive income, and what that is, you can delve into these forms. Now, some final thoughts on tax forms. These forms change all the time with the IRS. So if you go to irs.gov, there is there's the link there that you would go to, or the website that you would go to, and it will show you what's currently there. There's usually not a whole lot of changes, but the lines might change here and there, the numbers of them. And just remember that tax forms are just one form of third-party verification for finances. You can also consider statements from a CPA. If it's a business that's on the web, you might be able to gain some information there. But just wanted to show you where you can look at on the tax forms and the different schedules to get a little bit more comprehensive look at the financial piece for the cases that you're underwriting. So bottom line for underwriting is all times, does it make sense? If you don't have the full story, delve into the schedules. You might be able to put the pieces together a little bit better. So I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to review the tax forms with me, and please reach out with any questions or suggestions for other topics that you'd like us to cover on the Optimum Academy. Thank you.